LinkedIn was this ugly duckling of social media. It's just coming out of that phase right now. That's like a huge opportunity. It has been the biggest career amplifier that I've had so far. My most viral posts will get 500,000 views.
A lot of the trust over the last decade especially has shifted from businesses to people. There was an entire generation that went from, hey, it's okay, underplay it, be humble about it. And now, cut to today, they risk being invisible.
The difference is that at a dinner party, people have opted into being there with you. Whereas on social media, no one has to give a shit. People are reading content not because they care about you, it's because they're looking for something for them.
Before we get into that conversation with Will McTighe, who's a LinkedIn creator turned personal branding expert and media entrepreneur, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching the show. The Lakshmi Rebecca Show is brought to you by Makers, a borderless creative agency. Makers works with both fast-growing and large enterprises the world over to offer branding, strategy, campaign, and content solutions. Explore our services on www.makers.com. That's www.makers.com. Once again, thank you so much for watching the show. And if you haven't already, please hit subscribe and follow. Will, you're a crazy guy, and I'm so excited to have you in the studio today.
Crazy is not the word I was expecting you to say.
Well, I'll tell you why. And I mean crazy in a good way, unconventional and very interesting.
Thanks.
You studied mathematical economics at the University of Warwick, worked in investment banking in Goldman Sachs, did an MBA at Stanford, and then went on to become a LinkedIn creator. What an unusual trajectory.
I definitely couldn't have predicted it.
Yeah.
That's certainly for sure.
And that's why I'm calling you crazy. But wait, here are a couple of other crazy things that I found out about you. You signed up for a 40-mile ultra marathon, having never run a marathon before.
Yeah, I did. It won't be in your notes, but I also ran 100 miles on my own with a backpack in COVID.
Without prep.
No, I prepped, but I had never run a marathon before. Like the longest distance I'd ran was that other run that I did when I was at university.
Where was this? Where did you run?
I'll give you the whole story. Yeah. Okay, so...
Okay, we're going into the crazy first. Okay.
Yeah, let's go into the crazy first. So basically, it was COVID. I'd gotten into Stanford Business School. And at this point in time, I was like, I want to be an entrepreneur. But how do you practice being an entrepreneur when it's in COVID?
I'm going to test myself out there in the wilderness.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, well, as an entrepreneur, you have to do really hard things. So what hard thing can I do before I move to America?
You don't have to wait to become an entrepreneur. I'll just start training now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I wasn't that busy at work. So I was at this point in time, I was working in investing and I was already going to Stanford. And so things were winding down.
And this was in the UK?
This was in the UK. Yeah. And it was during COVID and you couldn't go outside apart from exercise to run. So I just started running and I started running a bit more. And then I was like, you know what? I should try and sign up for an ultramarathon. And so I signed up for this ultramarathon called the Thames Ultra, I think it was, which was 165 miles-ish over 4 days. And a few weeks before, it got cancelled. And I was like, oh, I'm in the fittest shape of my life. Like, I'm never going to be this fit again. And I decided, okay, fuck it. I'm going to try and run part of that race. But actually, let's see if I can just do 100 miles in one go. And so I took a train from London to Oxford and I was just wearing the clothes I was going to run back in. And I stayed overnight in like a Holiday Inn. And the next morning I got up and I just ran 100 miles back to near London. And I think I started at like 7 a.m. I think I started at 7 a.m. I was on my own the whole time and I finished at 3 a.m. And I finished and I just ordered an Uber home.
See, I was right to start this by calling you a crazy guy. Here's something else I also read, that you spent months stepping in and out of a ladder in a garden to improve your rugby footwork.
How did you find that? Yeah.
My team's very good at their research.
Yeah, I did. When I was a teenager, I played rugby pretty seriously. And I was very naturally fast, like running in a straight line. But I wanted to be better at being more nimble. And so I would just train in the garden and do like ladder work.
And how many months did you train for?
I think I did this for years.
So clearly you're just someone who, like, once you get into it, you put in all the hard work and the dedication you can throw at it to get really good at something. But tell me, how did you go from the MBA at Stanford to becoming a LinkedIn creator who grew his following from 3,000 to over 400,000 in 20 months? I think yours is one of the fastest creator growth stories on LinkedIn. In fact, I think you're in the top 1% of platform native creators on LinkedIn.
It's a great question. So I remember sitting in 2022 in Stanford doing this class called Reputation Management. And it was really, a lot of it was around personal branding. And I just sat there and being like, ugh, like, who needs this? Like, why would I ever do this? And
2020, right?
This was 2022. This is 2022.
Okay.
I was sitting in there and I was thinking, why would I ever need this? And it's so funny because I graduated from Stanford. I raised about $1 million in VC funding to start a company in the crypto space. That company didn't work and I ended up shutting it down. But in that process, I had a competitor who had a big personal brand. I basically remember this guy would walk into any meeting that he wanted with any potential customer, with an investor. Well, I was hanging around at conference booths in Singapore trying to get people to talk to me. And this guy...
I'm here, give me some attention.
Yeah,
Here
exactly. Give me some attention. Just sending
Yes.
people messages on Telegram.
Listen to me. I've got something important to, useful to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. His name is actually Antonio Garcia Martinez. He has a big personal brand on X and he's written a book. I think it's called Chaos Monkeys. And I just remember this guy would get any meeting he wanted. And I was like struggling tooth and nailing my way in. And so despite shutting the business down afterwards, I was like, well, whatever I do next, I want one of those.
Yeah.
And I originally started
You want to
posting.
walk into the room and be received rather than be ignored.
Yeah, and just get people to pay attention.
Yeah.
I'd seen that and I was trying to figure out what do I build next. And I was really looking at software for chemical distributors.
Okay.
And for US defense. And I was thinking, okay, where do these people hang out? Maybe they hang out on LinkedIn or Facebook. And so I started posting on LinkedIn, and that was February 2024.
And what did you start posting? How often did you post? How did you go from 3,000 followers to 400,000 in 20 months? Like, that sounds like a lot of work. Like just growing the followers. Is that what you did full time?
So I'll start with the first question. What I started posting about initially was just whatever. Like most people, it was just like random crap in my life. I think my first post that I posted was how to get good at learning languages.
Okay.
And
because you've learned Mandarin as well.
I've learned a bit of Mandarin, but I learned Spanish pretty seriously.
Okay.
So one thing I did, I'll take you down this tangent. So in between Goldman and working in investing, I love just like intense, concentrated learning. And so I did 3 things over that period of time. I had like 3 months. And it was actually the most important thing that I negotiated when I was changing job. I was like, I need to have 3 months off because I want to go and explore stuff because I just work so much in finance. And so the first thing I did was I really wanted to learn Spanish. I had never really studied it after the age of 16, but I was like, I'm passionate. I really like this language. And I found a 45 hours a week one-on-one language school in Mexico in this town called Cuernavaca. That's about an hour away from Mexico City. Mm-hmm. And so I went there and spent 5 weeks living in the school, and I'd have 3 tutors a day. And I was just like, by the end of the day, I would just be spewing gobbledygook because I just like burnt my brain. Yeah, I'd finish the day and then I'd turn on like Narcos in Spanish and just try and like learn more. And then at the weekends I'd travel and I'd go to other towns in Mexico. I've always just had this like real obsession with learning, and I get like hyper fixated on something. I'm like, I need to become. I love the process of improvement.
Yeah,
and I think that's part of what social media brings is you can see like how am I doing, and you get that instant feedback, which for ADHD types
can be
like
very
myself,
self-esteem shattering too.
Well, I don't know. If you have a company that doesn't work, there's not much that you can. You got no shame to lose in the first place.
Yeah. So to your first post on languages,
Yeah.
how to learn a new language, was it?
Yeah, I think it was something like that. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so how often did you post? What all did you post about? Tell me about the growth trajectory from there.
So the first month, this was like 9th of February 2024. The first month, I think I grew about 1,000 followers. So like 3,000 to 4,000. I posted about a variety of stuff. So I remember I had a post that did pretty well on why you should start your career in investment banking rather than Google. And this was when Google was like a really fun, exciting place to work with like great benefits. And obviously it was controversial and people were like, no, you're so wrong. Like Google's a way better place to work than investment banking. I think was more the response. So I would say I was like a B- content creator. Maybe like a C+, during that 1 month. I had some controversial hooks. I figured out I needed to use images, but I was like, oh, there's a game here. What I realized was that there are actually formulas and frameworks for getting good at content, and they're just not really written down. Like if you decide, oh, I want to start a company, you know that you should go to Y Combinator's website, read Paul Graham's essays, watch the YouTube videos, and they'll tell you how to find your first customers, how to iterate, and none of that exists for social media. But those principles do exist. Yeah. And I just got caught up in that. So I remember I paid for some coaching from some people. Like I did a coaching session with Chris Donnelly that was a bit of a eureka moment because he was like, look, your content's just way too niche at the time. And then I started going broader, started leaning more into visuals. And LinkedIn as a platform has changed a lot since I started posting. So what worked back then doesn't work now. But that was really where I started.
So how often did you post to start with? What kind of formats did you post? And what did you eventually start posting about that gave you the most traction and growth?
So I started from day one, I posted 7 days a week.
Whoa. Okay.
I approached it with the same intensity that I approached a Spanish language school.
All running. Yeah.
All the ski instructor course that I haven't told you about, like all of it.
I know about that.
You know about that one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was like 7 days a week and like learn from every single post, like what worked, what didn't work, what are my hypotheses as to why. And what I really found that started working was leaning into what I had a right to talk about, which was how to get a better job. I think my audience initially when I was creating content was basically people who are junior to mid-level in their career who were trying to get a leg up. And so some of my most viral posts initially were job interview cheat sheets, where I posted, I think 3 of them. And the first one got maybe 8 or 9 million views and more than 10,000 new followers. And then I was like, well, okay, actually there are lots of more job interview questions that I didn't cover in the first one.
So to follow on.
So I did another one. And then that one still got 4 or 5 million views. And then I did another one. And that one got under 1 million views. And so at that point I was like, okay, I've flogged this horse to death.
You're on to something now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest principle that I learned in the early days was pattern recognition and looking at what else is working that you have a right to speak about. So in my case, when I started posting content, I had done some traditionally prestigious things. Like I worked in investment banking, I got an MBA at Stanford. And so when people are thinking about, okay, who should I listen to when it comes to getting a better job? I was someone that they were willing to listen to.
You had the creds for it.
Yeah. And then over time, as I've built my brand, I've started talking more about how to build your brand on LinkedIn. And as I've built my own businesses, I started talking a bit more about how to be a solopreneur. And now I'm starting to hire people. And so at some point, I'm going to talk about what it's like to lead a bigger team and hire, etc. But I think when I started out, I tried posting about other things that I didn't really have like credentials on, and it just didn't really work as well.
And do you still post every day?
Yeah, I think
of the week?
I've posted every day since 9th of February 2024. I'm just painfully consistent.
That's amazing. That's amazing. But why LinkedIn? Or why just LinkedIn? Why not LinkedIn and Twitter?
Every platform has their own tone. And for you to become really excellent at anything, it requires just focus. So if I had tried to other platforms at once, I didn't have a team. I was in the day researching and cold calling chemical distributors and people that worked in US defense. And then the weekends, I'd be just cramming and making my content. And so I didn't have the bandwidth to do multiple platforms. And I think also if you are a creator starting out, there is a real benefit to just focus, like putting your attention on how can I get really good at this one platform, because every platform has a different tone.
Got it.
And LinkedIn's tone is really informed by the fact that it is an open network. So people's connections and professional relationships can see everything they're posting. And so that means it is nice. Whereas X is really anonymous. And so people are a lot meaner there because they can say what they actually think. Similarly, people on LinkedIn often don't engage with content publicly because if they engage with a post on salary negotiations and their boss sees, the boss is like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
So the tone informs.
So a lot of people tend to be more passive participants or passive observers on LinkedIn.
Passive observers and just saying nice, sweet nothings.
So where has this journey taken you? I think the 400,000 followers on LinkedIn is just the start. You've built a couple of different business models and revenue models around this. Unbundle that for me.
Yeah. So the first one is a more traditional creator business, which is an ads business. And that is where I post ads of brands that I tend to use. And that business is, I guess, like fun. Like it's not my primary business, but it's very profitable because the margin is super high. Like the cost base associated with doing ads is basically zero. And then I also have SayWhat. So SayWhat is a tool for solopreneurs and exec coaches to help build their brands on LinkedIn. Basically, what happened is I started running into a bunch of pain points. I tried a bunch of the tools. I didn't like them. And so that's really where SayWhat was born. I think I was maybe 5 months into posting on LinkedIn and I was losing my mind around commenting. I had a wedding in Austria and I was sitting there 2 hours before the ceremony writing LinkedIn comments because I was like, I need to make sure I support the people that I support on LinkedIn today. And I remember just being like, there's got to be a better way. Like I am losing my mind. And so I spoke to a bunch of other creators and asked them like, hey, do you have this problem as well? And they did. And so I met up with a friend of mine. I just said to him, hey, I think there's a problem to solve here. It's just a small bootstrap business. I don't think it's going to be huge, but these people have a real pain point. And that's where SayWhat started. It was a tool to give you a simplified feed to comment on people that you want to comment on with some AI assistance. So basically it would help you draft a comment, but you had to make sure that you edited it and sent it yourself. We didn't do any, and we still don't do any automations because LinkedIn really doesn't like that. And then that feature has, I guess, now become a lot less important. And we just built other features over time as we got feedback from our users. So it's about finding great content ideas because, as I mentioned at the start, you need to see what's working and use that for inspiration because there's a better chance of something working if it has worked before. And then similarly helping with writing and now helping with infographic generation. So all the whiteboard infographics that you see on my LinkedIn, I create.
That's all generated via SayWhat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. So I know you have a newsletter as well.
Yeah.
So did you have the newsletter even before you started posting on LinkedIn? Did it come later? When? Like, give me the timeline of this.
Let's talk about how I grew SayWhat initially,
Okay.
and then we'll get into the newsletter as well. So initially, what I did is we had this janky little product that was just a feed which would make commenting faster, and I reached out in LinkedIn DMs to people who I thought could be a good fit for this. That was generally other aspiring creators. And what I said to them in a message was, hey, I have this problem and I'm building a solution. Do you have this problem too? Would you be open to a quick chat? And on that chat, I wanted to learn if they did have the problems. Were they spending money to try and solve it? So what other tools were they using? Because it's a great indicator if someone else is already paying to solve this problem, that they would maybe pay for yours too. And then I would jump on calls with them. And I would do 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour with probably 100 plus people at the start. And I tried to deliver value on that call. So I would try and tell them tips.
I think you still offer this, don't you? I signed up for SayWhat and I got the email about block 15 minutes with Will. Yes.
Yeah. I still do that for annual plan losers.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I would spend time trying to learn about their pain point, but also deliver value. Because I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make when they're trying to start a business is they're like, gimme. And often the way you get something off the ground is you deliver value. So you think about how can I actually help people? And that's where I got my first set of customers for SayWhat was LinkedIn outbound. And people would think, okay, you have 20, 30, 40, 50,000 followers? Aren't the leads just like coming flying in? And the reality is I was still so new that people didn't trust me. And when people think about content creation, they often think, I'll just start posting and then it's just going to be a big pile of cash that just like shows up at my door.
Well, that's what I imagined.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Building trust takes a lot of time. And, you know, as I've seen in my business, like take my brand partnerships business, like in 2024, I did probably like 20 grand. In 2025, I think it was 200-300. And then in the first 3 months of 2026, it was, I think, 150. Things that feel, and whenever you're starting a business, it always feels slow and painful at first. It's never easy.
You're putting down the foundations.
Yeah, you're laying the foundations, and the problem is you don't know whether it's going to pay off.
Yeah.
And that fear is what people struggle with. Yeah. People are like, I want to start a business, and they see on Instagram that people are like 12-year-olds are making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they're like, how am I the schmuck
can't figure this out?
That can't figure this out. And the reality is it just takes a long time. Like I'm now 3.5 years into entrepreneurship, and now I feel like I'm making real money. But anyway, back to the journey. I got to my first 100K followers in my first 6 months. I then, at some point in that journey, I started a newsletter. The newsletter was on career development, which is what I had originally posted about.
Started posting about, yes.
And I did that for a few months before I actually killed it.
Was it a LinkedIn newsletter?
No.
It was, a private mailing list.
Yes, I always recommend people to take people off platform. You'll see in every one of my LinkedIn posts, I have some form of lead magnet.
So build your own community.
Build your own list so that you can keep in touch with people. I think the thing that people get wrong about newsletters is often they want to start a broad newsletter. And so they think, I'll just talk about career development. That was a mistake I made. And the reality is you need to talk about exactly what you're going to sell. So I ended up doing this newsletter for a few months, and then I ended up just stopping it because I spent my whole Saturday writing it, and it just wasn't related to the business I was building, which at the time was just SayWhat. So then newsletter took a pause. I picked it up again later. So I think it was last week I had posted for a year every week. And this newsletter has just been on how to build a personal brand, specifically on LinkedIn. And it is a mix of some weeks it'll be very tactical, like here's how to do an introduction post that generally performs really well, or it's some story from my life. And now it is aligned on doing two things. One, building trust with people, and two, establishing myself as a niche expert and saying things that only I can say. And so if anyone else is thinking about a newsletter, that's how I would think about it. Think about what am I going to sell and just talk about that topic.
And then the other business that you've built?
Yeah. So the other business is an exec branding agency. Like I haven't announced this yet, and it's still a bit.
Is this the big announcement?
and it's still pretty under wraps. Like we don't have a website or anything. But I basically work with CEOs and execs at pretty big companies, generally in tech, although some outside of tech, and help build founder brands. And I think that's what I'm really excited about. And there's a big opportunity there because that market is very immature right now.
Yeah. Very fascinating, right? What you just said about what you're building now leads me to my next question. The little bit of research I did tells me that about 15 years ago, around the same time as the global financial crisis, there was also a start of a crisis of confidence in corporate brands. While we still have enough companies investing in branding and, CopCom and marketing, a lot of the trust over the last decade especially has shifted from businesses to people. So B2B and B2C has replaced what's I think now called P2P, person to person. And also interestingly, about 10 years ago, platforms like LinkedIn and X shifted their algorithms when they realized that people were engaging more with posts from individuals rather than businesses, right? So organic reach for business pages plummeted, and then organic reach for personal handles soared to I think some 300x or something like that. Founders and leaders suddenly were, if you weren't already naturally drawn to it, forced to be out there a lot more, to be seen a lot more. There was an entire generation that went from, hey, it's okay, underplay it. You're already, in a senior role, be humble about it. And, they risked being visible. And now, cut to today, they risk being invisible if they're not out there, right? And then here's something that data also threw up for me. And I'm not 100% sure about this, but when a founder or a leader has a great personal brand, the benefits are nearly 40% lower cost of hiring, 3 to 7x higher lead conversion, sales cycles that are 20% shorter, 30% higher customer retention rate, and more importantly, greater market value for the company.
Those are some great numbers. I can certainly see why they'd be the case. It's always hard to quantify this stuff because it's brand marketing.
Yeah.
And for a lot of companies, there are so many different touch points between someone seeing something from a founder and then actually buying. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I can completely see it. Like anecdotally, I've had clients say like, wow, our employees are more engaged now because some of them are in different time zones and they feel more connected with me, or people are just listening to me more than they listen in an all hands meeting by looking at my LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can completely see that's the case.
Yeah.
I think as well, it's certainly gone in shifts. Like it goes platform by platform. Mm-hmm. So I think back in 2009, it was probably Facebook V1, and it definitely wasn't B2B back then. Like B2C shifted much earlier, and you started with celebrities. I think in general, there's this preconceived notion that you can only be a content creator if you are fabulously wealthy already.
Mm-hmm. Paris Hilton.
Yeah, or a scam artist. And it's really like those two categories.
I'm selling you Nirvana.
Yeah, exactly. And that was certainly like my preconceived notion about content creation.
Yeah.
But what I realized is actually there's a huge opportunity for most people, like yes, founders, but also other people who want to get ahead in their careers. Mm-hmm. Like it has been the biggest career amplifier that I've had so far. It doesn't replace experience because what it does is it amplifies what you're already known for and good at. Mm-hmm. And the reality is most people don't do that. Like if 1,000 people, maybe 100 people know how amazing you are at something, and you can change that to 10,000 people, that's insane. Like that's a massive amplifier. Mm-hmm.
So do you think LinkedIn has now become what a personal website and newsletter used to be?
I think that until really late last year, LinkedIn was this ugly duckling of social media. So back in whenever it was like 2019, 2020, when TikTok was this like weird thing, LinkedIn is still in that phase. It's just coming out of that phase right now where people are starting to take it seriously. And I think that's like a huge opportunity. So yes, it is becoming your personal website. Like when people are looking at joining your company, they'll search for the founder on LinkedIn and they'll just see what they're posting. So yeah, short answer.
But let me ask this. If I was a founder or a business leader or a solopreneur, why should I be active on LinkedIn today?
The question I would always ask anyone first is, where does your target audience live? And the audience for Instagram or TikTok is much more B2C. Mm-hmm. And so if you're selling towels or cooking or anything to do with cooking as like silly examples, then that's probably a great place to create content. Mm-hmm. If you're selling B2B contracts, for example, software or hardware, you need to think to yourself, where do my buyers live? The other thing I think is like, where do employees hang out? So for example, LinkedIn is great for sales, marketing, a lot of non-technical roles. But if you want to hire, for example, top AI engineers, then having a presence on X is probably more effective than LinkedIn. So before I tell someone to post on LinkedIn, I'd ask, like, where do your buyers live? Like I spoke to someone who was selling virtual swimming lessons as a form of therapy. They were trying to post on LinkedIn. And my thought was that's a very bad place to post because what you're selling
Yeah.
is something that needs to be represented visually.
Mm-hmm.
And so posting on Instagram or TikTok could be a much better place for that than LinkedIn.
So assuming I do run a B2B business, okay, assuming that what I am selling is to another business, right? How do I best leverage LinkedIn?
I think it depends on whether you are a small business owner or big business owner.
Mm-hmm.
The strategy.
Okay, laid out for me both ways.
Okay. Small business owner, I think there are a few different jobs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
The first is creating content to build awareness. And for that, I think about educational content relevant for your niche. I think where a lot of people go wrong is they say, okay, I just want awareness, so I'm going to talk about remote work or burnout, these two like really, really applicable topics that loads of people have experience. Like everyone loves employee well-being and kindness and all these topics like that, but that doesn't build awareness in your niche.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing is awareness content, which is often educational. So
in your niche.
In your niche.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if you're in the data governance niche, a post about the harsh realities of data governance would perform well. And you're using things that have worked in broader niches, because that's something also very important. You've seen an idea has worked before somewhere else, and you're using it in your niche. So harsh truths posts perform really well, like harsh career truths. But if you tailor it to your specific audience, like events management, data governance, whatever it is that you sell, you can become a niche authority by using things that have worked elsewhere.
Got it.
So there's awareness and educational content. The goal of educational content is to drive new followers. People go, okay, I'm going to follow Lakshmi because I'm going to learn about something from her every day. Then the second bucket is trust building content. And that is personal stories, pictures that give people an insight into how you work and operate. So that could be things like behind the scenes photos. It could be videos of you. It could be stories, but stories ideally that relate a little bit to your business, not just like totally random stories. Like this weekend I went to yoga, which some people I think tend to do. The other thing that I think is important in these trust building posts is if you're doing pictures of you, pictures signaling authority. So for example, if you're presenting on stage, getting a good picture of you, subtly what that does in people's minds is they see you with a microphone. What they're thinking is, oh, other people think Will's worth listening to, so maybe I should listen to him too. And it's that very subtle social signaling that you're doing in content. And so, yeah, that's the trust building bucket. And the final bucket is lead generation content. So after you have brought people into your universe to follow you and you've helped them get to know you so they trust you a bit more, then it's showing that you drive results.
Okay.
And there are really 3 types of content in here. Type 1 is transformation case studies. So what people typically do with a case study is they say, Will's a great guy, love working with him. You really recommend you do too. That's a bad case study because when one of your target audience is reading that, they're thinking, does this person have the problems that I have? And did Will help them over problems? That's really what they're focused on. So case study content, that includes screenshots of text messages.
So keep it really real.
Really real, making it very clear in the hook, the before and after. One of the biggest mistakes I see creators make is they will say, well, I've been posting case studies, I'm not getting any leads. And then I'll look through their feed and I'll look at their text hook and their image, and I don't see anything that tells me it's a case study. And if it's buried below the see more button, then no one saw it. So case studies is one. The second type of conversion content is objection handling content. So with that, you would have something in the hook. Maybe the objection is LinkedIn is cringe. And your hook would be an example hook would be someone saying LinkedIn is cringe and you then explaining why actually it's not, or why there's value despite it being cringe. And so you're overcoming objections before buyers actually meet you. And the final form is video testimonials of buyers. And these are effective because they build a lot of trust. And when people see other people who have bought from you, then they're like, okay.
So much more inclined to buy from you.
Yeah. Exactly. And so you can put those on the featured section of your profile. But anyway.
No, that's very useful. Thank you for breaking that down for me.
Of course.
Now that's as a creator or a solopreneur, right? Or a small business.
Mm-hmm.
What's the framework if I'm the founder of a well-funded, fast-scaling business?
So there are really 4 buckets of content if you are a big company. And these all tie back to goals. Mm-hmm. So you may want to lean more on certain types of content depending on...
So let me lay out some goals for you then.
Okay,
let's test this out, right? So my goal, let's say, for example, I'm a fast-scaling voice AI business. And my goal is to land the right kind of investors for the next round, right? So I want more visibility for my brand. And I want attributed trust where other leaders in my company are also out there maybe, so people know that it's just not one founder, that there's a whole team to trust, right? That our tech stack is fantastic, that we've got customers that, are buying from us and they pay us well. So many messages I need to put out there to ensure that I land the right valuation, the right investors who also open doors and don't just throw money at the problem or the opportunity.
Yeah. So investors is a unique category. So with investors, you need to make them think that, wow, this thing is growing so fast. It's a hot potato. I need to get on board with this. And so for investors, and I'm going to talk across the different content buckets here, showing things like customer wins, talking about how fast you're growing, and like really making that feel very tangible in your content is where I would be focusing energy. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I would be doing is boosting specific posts that perform well to that specific audience, which just shows people how fast you're growing. And then I think there are a bunch of other... So I'll go through the 4 buckets in general, because I think it's just a helpful framing. The first goal is really around hiring.
So hang on, now we're not talking so much from the pitching to investors and attract the right investors. You're saying as a business, there are 4 buckets.
Yes. Okay. As a business in general, there are 4 buckets. And depending on what you need to focus on at that point in time, you weight things differently.
Okay.
And so founder stories, which is how did the business come about? What are stories from the early days? These things make potential hires like you more, and they also make people in your company feel more connected to you. For example, if you're an older business, people may not know the stories from the early days. So that is one bucket that is important. You can also do things here like highlighting specific individuals who sum up the values of the company. So you spotlight people in the team who sum something up, and you explain why this person sums up that value. And then people read that and they maybe identify with that value. So for example, it could be something simple like working really hard. If that is like a core value for your business, you could highlight someone. So take a picture of the founder with that person, being like, this person works really hard. Here's why it's so important for us. And then that will attract and then push away the right kinds of people.
It'll act as a filter. So it's the soul almost. So let's say the soul, the culture and values and story behind the company.
Exactly. That's in earlier stage businesses. Mm-hmm. And then those posts are also really helpful in later stage businesses, because the later stage businesses have to retain employees. And so hearing stories from the founder and from the execs about their actual experiences make people feel more connected with them. Mm-hmm. And so you can actually reduce churn, because people feel like, okay, I know these people. It's not just some, asshole billionaire CEO that's running this company who doesn't give a crap about us. Mm-hmm. So that's bucket 1. Mm-hmm. And bucket 2 is industry perspectives. So that is putting forward differentiated perspectives on the niche that you are operating in. So for example, if you're in sales tech and you've run a big sales org or built a big sales org for your business, you can talk about go-to-market takes. You can also talk about the things you've learned from talking to lots of buyers. And that comes in a lot of different forms, but generally companies have a differentiated point of view about the world and how they think the world should be. You can use that to position yourself as an expert. And that's things like presenting on stage and showing that you are a high authority person. Mm-hmm. The next bucket is customer case studies. And so there are really a few different things in this. There is a simple picture of their logo with your logo. And then you can also take pictures when you meet customers as well, because that also does the same thing. If they repost it or people in their network see the post, then they'll think, okay, well, this person may be worth talking to because someone who I respect is also talking to them. And you're playing into that like human psychology of like status, which is what drives a lot of stuff. The final bucket is what I call spectacles.
Okay.
And spectacles are ways to get people bought in to your business. So for example, there was a great one on LinkedIn by a guy called Adam Robinson, where basically he announced in August, my whole team is going to go offline in 6 weeks and our company is going to be run by agents for a week. And over the next 6 weeks, I'm going to tell you everything that we're doing to get there. And this was really effective because the outcome was unclear.
So people are actually following the narrative, the live narrative. It's almost like live TV.
Yes.
Reality show.
People want to know what happens.
What's happening behind that door? Yeah.
Exactly. People want to know what's happening. And because it looks like that person could end up with egg on their face, they're interested. They want to see like what actually happens.
Okay. Sadistic audiences. Yes. Okay.
But that's
human behavior.
Yeah. Humans care when there's stakes. And so you can create situations like that when you're making big investments in your business that could go wrong. You can talk about it and say, hey, we're making this big investment. We don't know if it's going to go right, but follow along and find out.
Wow. That would be so entertaining. And I can see why people would follow that because you also have a thread to continue on for weeks or months or whatever, however long that takes. And that really is like watching a show.
And people do that a lot in B2C. Like someone's like, oh, I'm training for a marathon, follow along to see if I hit 3 hours.
Week 1, week 2, week 3. Yeah, absolutely.
But it's just not made its way into B2B yet. And so we're starting to see that. And I think that's an interesting area.
So we've talked about the solopreneur, SMB, and the buckets for them. And we've talked about a fast-growing business, I think, right now, the 4 buckets. Is there a difference between the founder and a leader at a fast-growing, let's say a funded startup, as opposed to a really large enterprise? Do you see that framework changing? You did touch upon it when you talked about it. I know, for example, we have clients, who invest a lot in thought leadership, large brands, right? And they want their leaders to be more visible.
I'd probably think about doing side by side. You could publicly talk about the objections to buying your platform and subtly imply like how your thing is better than the other thing. Like, I have a client who has mentioned a few times how people have gone and bought another solution and then they have come back. And so that signals to people reading, oh, actually their product is better.
I do find, however, that especially in large enterprises and older brands, people hesitate to take this tone. Leaders want to play nice.
Yeah.
We don't go out there and say, hey, this client of ours or this potential client said no to us for these reasons. You don't name.
Yeah.
Right. You also don't name the competitor. Right. You are generally in a large enterprise, you're much more shy about how much you say. You play a lot more safe. So how do you overcome something like that? Or is that not the playbook anymore?
I think you have to have really senior buy-in. Like you have to have senior people being
a lot more candid.
Yeah, just candid. They need to also decide that this is really important for the business.
So this is the communication strategy.
Yeah.
This is the brand building strategy.
I think the issue you run into is when the marketing team says, okay, let's do one thing. And then senior management who you need to be bought in isn't bought in. And so then ends up being this half-assed effort. Mm-hmm. And the way everyone shows up online is different. So I'm not saying you need to talk about everything in your life. I think it's actually important that you say, okay, here are some areas of things that I don't talk about, because that makes it easier in your mind to be like, okay, what is my public persona? And then what am I keeping to myself? But I think the biggest issue is you just need buy-in. And for some businesses, they decide, okay, this is existential. We need to adapt.
I know, for example, there's a whole generation of people, like I was saying, who went from, I don't want to be seen, I don't need to be seen, you should not be seen, to now if they're not seen, it's a risk. Being invisible is a risk. But we're still adjusting to that mentally.
Yeah.
Like I feel like this whole like being out there on LinkedIn and trying to figure what to post and trying to figure how many times to post and just being on LinkedIn, dedicating time sometimes feels like it's too much to ask of a founder, of a leader, of someone who spent all their time becoming this fantastic expert at something. Right. It can feel overwhelming. It can feel like pressure. Oh my God, one more thing I'm supposed to figure out. But I'm used to being behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I know enough really successful people who couldn't be bothered being out there. Right. But now these are the same individuals who are waking up to the fact that, hey, I need to be more visible. The dynamics of communication and branding have shifted a little bit, right? So when they come to you, and I'm sure you have clients like this, how do you help them navigate that shift? Because I think, and I'm talking about people who are sitting on the fence here, who are not completely convinced about being out there.
Yeah. I try to not work with those people.
Okay.
Because I think you can feel uncomfortable, but know that it's important and be committed to it. And that's when I can do my best work. I can help take all your experience and turn that into great stories because you have so much experience that you can share with the world. I think it's very hard to take someone who's on the fence and get them bought in. And I don't think that's my job.
Let's say I am convinced that I need to be out there and I have no clue how to go about this.
Yeah.
And I am a senior leader. I'm well known in my industry. My clients respect me. I've got a lot of clout offline.
Yeah.
Okay. And now I need to bring this online. And I come to you and I'm like, how do I do this? Where do we begin? Where do you begin with this process?
Yeah. So then we'll do a content interview.
Okay.
Generally, what I like to do is fly out and spend time in person with whoever I'm working with and get to know them so that they feel a bit more comfortable around me for the first time we meet. And then we'll just start going through questions. And with every question, I'm looking for a thread that can become an interesting story based on the goals that we've talked about. I just think about those first three buckets of content. I think about how do you speak to your stories and things that people might find inspiring? And then how do we put forward your differentiated points of view on your market and some stuff on customers as well. So if you are trying to attract new customers, then I think it's important to have that bucket. And so you can do that like one post a week on each of those. And then as you start to figure out, okay, what feels right, what should I do less of, what should I do more of, then we can go from there.
Okay.
So one post a week for each of those. So 3 posts.
And how long does it take to ramp up from there? Do you advise that senior folks ramp up from there, the number of posts that they put out?
It depends on the person. I generally work with people who are putting maybe one thing out a week, one thing out every 2 weeks already. Just maybe they're reposting something from their company. And so we tend to ramp up pretty quickly. If someone is completely starting from scratch, then maybe one post a week for a month, and then ramp up to 2 or 3 once they get the habit of it.
And if you're already posting 1 a week, then you ramp it up to 3 is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think you need to do more than 3 on LinkedIn as a senior leader. It's just not necessary.
Okay. What are the biggest barriers you think for to succeed in personal branding on LinkedIn?
For a exec?
Yeah, we can break it down.
Yeah.
Exec versus founder versus solopreneur.
Well, for all of them, it's stopping the scroll. Like the first limiting constraint that people have in content is that people don't stop and read it in the first place. And so that really means the first 3 lines of text and the image in static content. In video content, it's obviously the sound as well, what you see on screen, and then the text. And so much of what I'm thinking about when I'm talking to people in content interviews is what's the angle? What's the framing? In the same way that when you package up this YouTube video, you'll be looking for, okay, what is the snippet?
Yeah. So what's the hook that's going to get the most views? Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's thinking with that point of view first. And you have to make sure that you stay aligned with whatever they want to do in the business and their reputation. And and then you go from there and you figure out the stories from that.
Is there a way to figure out also what format works for you most? And I ask this because, like, if you take me, I'm very comfortable in the video format, right? Maybe I can do some writing, but I don't think I've cracked the LinkedIn, post copy formula yet. Now, there are enough business leaders and entrepreneurs and solopreneurs out there who can't write a story to save their life, right? It doesn't come naturally, right? Yes, today there are apps and tools that help with this, but it can feel like it's a lot of effort. Mm-hmm. So how do you navigate that? And how do you help people figure, if there are formats, for example, that they lean more naturally towards and how they can leverage that?
So on LinkedIn in particular, I don't really do a ton of video with people. It tends to be more picture plus text or text only.
And why is that?
Video is great for helping people get to know you more on LinkedIn. It doesn't, from what I've seen, drive as much follower growth. And so what we tend to lean on is pictures of the exec and some text with it.
Got it.
And it really depends on the person and their vibe.
So even if I'm shit at writing for LinkedIn, I definitely have to learn this, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
And throw in a nice picture from time to time.
Yeah, exactly. Pictures tend to stop the scroll. Well, it could be picture or educational. I think with execs, you don't tend to do these infographics and carousels and that kind of stuff because it's not appropriate most of the time, given that they are like senior leaders in their industry. But pictures of them tends to perform well. But really depends on the niche. For example, I work with some people in hardware, and people in their niche love behind the scenes pictures of hardware. And so we post pictures of the hardware because it performs really well.
Okay.
And so you're always looking like, okay, what do people in this niche really care about? What gets them going content wise? And then
and is that and figuring that out, is that a process of
testing,
trial and error?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just testing, but also taking the knowledge that you develop from different clients. So if you work with more clients, you can see, okay, what works in that niche? And then that gives you an idea of something to experiment with in a different niche. So it's a lot of pattern recognition.
Yeah.
And then on your question around writing, I mean, that's what I do with these execs is we basically get the stories out by word, and then we figure out, okay, what is the core message that we want to tell, and how do we thread this needle whilst also having a hook and a picture that is aligned with what they want to say. Like we'll sometimes even send props to their office.
Okay, just to get the right kind of picture that you want.
Yeah, like we'll create a picture in Gemini or something and be like, can you make a picture like this, but with the person in?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's for your clients. And for, assuming there are a bunch of people who are watching this who can't really afford Will and team.
Yeah.
What happens then? What's your advice for them?
Well, it depends on what your business is. But if you are this exec type and you want to get more content out, I would come up with a list of questions around mistakes that you've made, generally things involving transformations. So mistakes, learning moments, unexpected thoughts, and contrarian points of view. And so you can ask yourself questions like, what are things that you believe that most people in your industry think is stupid? Or the other way around, what are things that you think are stupid that most people in your industry believe? And because in those questions, you're always looking for what are the interesting angles.
It's a conversation opener.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you can just talk into your notes using something like Whisperflow, which I really like. And then you can use AI to help package that up a little bit. But it's really important to not lose your voice. That's something I spend a ton of time thinking about is, does this sound like the person speaking out loud? And I think generally in the age of AI, that's something really, really important, that you sound in your writing like you do out loud. And so if someone reads something, they think, okay, that is how that person speaks. So if you emphasize a lot when you talk, do you use capitals sometimes in your writing? Because that represents your brand. Someone who does this really well is Stephen Bartlett.
Yeah.
If you read his LinkedIn posts, they sound like how he talks on Diary of a CEO. They use like the posh little words he sometimes uses. And that's something I tend to think about when I'm writing for other people is I'll just hum out loud the sentence and be like, would they say loads or would they say a lot? And because you have to get it down to that level of detail to be really good at it. And so do that for yourself. If you want to write for yourself, just think, would I use that word? And if the answer is no, then change it. Because AI is great for first drafts. It's terrible for polished product.
And are you already seeing a lot of AI slop on LinkedIn?
Oh, there's so much. So much. And the way you stand out is proof. Like, talk about the things that you've done. Like I mentioned earlier, there were different waves of LinkedIn. Prior to 2024, you could just post, I had a great day with my family, and you'd go viral. In 2024 and early 2025, educational content ruled. It was quite impersonal, but it was like educational infographics, educational carousels. And then in mid to late 2025 and 2026, now it's show me the receipts. It's show me the proof points that tell me why I should listen to you versus someone else. And that's where I think it's ultimately going, is you have to just show proof, because it's easier than ever to say something. It's to take someone's video from YouTube, change a few words on the teleprompter, and then just get in there. And so it's really showing, what have you done to make yourself worth listening to? And I think the final thing I'd say on these CEOs is that there are often more stakeholders they need to think about. And so it's a bit more complicated, but they need to be brave. And it's very easy to be like, okay, we have this problem, we have that problem. What if it annoys this person or that person? And, oh, there's a picture with someone. What if they've left the company?
Yes.
And you just need to let go of some of that and go, okay, what is the 80-20 here?
And are you saying this also because things are changing so rapidly now?
It's more because they have big companies, and so they have to push against the grain to do new things. And they have all these stakeholders. They have people who maybe things that they could check. Whereas these small, fast-growing companies don't have all this legacy infrastructure and teams and comms people and marketing people and just like everything else.
So you're saying go out there and take more chances.
I think it's true for everyone. Like the biggest problem in content is that content's too boring. That's your limiting constraint on LinkedIn.
Tell me more about this. Why do you think that the biggest problem with content is that content is boring?
So I think fundamentally, humans approach, particularly humans from the business world, approach content like they're at a dinner party. At a dinner party, people will be patient when you ramble. They will listen if you go on a little bit too much. And then they go, okay, I'm just going to put the same story I told last weekend, like into a LinkedIn post. And the difference is that at a dinner party, people have opted into being there with you. They've decided.
And they've opted in to be polite.
Yes. Whereas on social media, no one has to give a shit. And so the big value driver, the big difference is putting the value up front, telling people why they should care in the first place. And that's why proof and authority is so important. These are new people. They don't know you. You have to tell them why they should listen to you as opposed to someone else.
So what are the top two things that people get wrong when it comes to content and LinkedIn and building their personal brand?
I think it is their hooks are just bad. And what does that mean? It means that they don't give people a reason to stop and read. And often authority is a great reason. So if, for example, you have, or you do run a company saying, as a CEO that manages 1,000 people, here's how I think about hiring, people might go, oh, he's a CEO or she's a CEO. Maybe I should listen to what they have to say. And what people will do normally is they'll just launch straight into like whatever it is that they want to say, rather than telling people why. Why should I listen to you? So that is by far and away the biggest problem with content.
So let's talk about authenticity. I feel like a lot of people are trying to engineer authenticity.
Yeah.
Instead of figuring out how to just be themselves.
Yeah. So I think the way that people get authenticity wrong is they will tell like their life story and all their deepest trauma without tying it back to the reader in some way. And remember, people are reading content not because they care about you, it's because they're looking for something for them. And so whenever you tell a story, you need to tie it back to the reader, particularly if you're early on. If you have a bigger brand, people might already care about what you have to say. But people listening to this, most people don't have a brand. And with that, when you're at that point in the journey, like you need to tie it back to people, and they're looking to see if there's inspiration or something they can take away from it. So your story is a vehicle, and your authenticity is a vehicle for a point that they can use in their own lives. For example, I wrote a post on how being 5,000 miles away from my mom is hard. I'm her only son. And and frankly, it gets tough. But the thing I then mentioned is that doing my own thing and running my own business means that I have flexibility and I actually can grow a boat whenever I need to. I'm not tied to a holiday schedule and I can just work in the UK or do whatever.
Yeah.
That really resonated with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because that's what people want. People want control of their own lives. And so that story is true to me, but I also told it in a way that made it relatable to the reader. And it pushed people to do their own thing and take more control over their lives.
So what did you say in that post?
The challenge of living 5,000 miles away, and then the fact that fortunately, because I do my own thing, I can fly out, and whenever there's a wedding, whenever there's anything going on, if ever she were to get ill, I can just pop over because I control my own time.
And if needed, you can work from there. But how did you then make that relatable to other people?
I then flipped it at the end to be like, if you want to do this too, like start building your personal brand because it gives you leverage and it gives you the ability to walk away from stuff.
Yeah, so you tied it back to the central thread, so to speak. Yeah.
And then at the bottom, I had a call to action, which was like a free email course that is like, here's 8 emails in 8 days on how you can build your personal brand starting from zero.
Yeah.
And that got a ton of click-throughs. As well as messages from people because people were like, oh, I feel this pain and I actually want that outcome that you have.
Yeah. I feel like SayWhat is also timed really well. There's this whole, especially post the pandemic or maybe during the pandemic, this rising of people wanting to be solopreneurs, wanting passive income. And therefore also a lot of people wanting to learn how to do that, how to be independent, have more time to themselves and for their personal lives and a better work-life balance while still having enough money in the bank.
Yeah.
So the timing of that was very exciting. And I think now the timing of what you're doing next is also very exciting.
Yeah. I think people in general want more control of their own lives. That's the biggest thing. Yes, they want money, but for most people, it's actually not as much money. It's more about control.
Yeah. So you have this very clear opinion on what you're seeing with solopreneurs, right?
Yeah.
What do you think is happening with senior leaders and founders?
Founders, it is that they are struggling to get people to buy from their business and know about them. In AI, it's differentiating from the competition. Generally, it's hard for buyers to choose between 10 different AI products. They're like, what is the difference? And the only way they can tell is actually when they're using it. So they often go off social signals like LinkedIn. Like, what do they think of this person? Does this person have good logos? And that's why it's super important for founders. And the founders are also trying to break into that market.
Yeah.
And so they have like an existential need, which is why a lot of them post more. The senior leaders, I think it's kind of the opposite where they're like, oh, we are under threat. And so they are the slowest to adopt, but the ones who are most under threat are adopting first.
Through this process, I know it's been only a few years of being an entrepreneur and trying different things, right? And already I feel like you've tried multiple things to arrive at where you are today. What is the one thing you've actually learned about yourself that was like an aha moment for you? And I ask this because I think both deep relationships and entrepreneurial journeys teach us a lot about ourselves.
Yeah. What I've learned about myself is that I can build deep relationships wherever I go. I started in crypto with no relationships there and then built really deep relationships there. Moved on to LinkedIn and then built really deep relationships there too. So I think it's that. And then it's also that life is really about just taking on more and more challenges. There is no end point. There is no, okay, when I make this much money, then I'm done. It's just keep playing the game and just keep having fun.
Yeah.
And that's probably it.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me in the studio today, Will. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you.
I loved it. Thank you.